One coin tossed on the table was enough to rob a billionaire of sleep for many nights. The sharp clang rang out as the coin struck the glass tabletop. The sound of metal on crystal echoed through the opulent room, cutting like a cold blade straight into the dignity of the man across from it. That night, the city's most luxurious restaurant blazed with light. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections across glasses of dark red wine. The booming laughter of the elite reverberated off gilded walls. They raised their glasses, clinking them together, trading words about million-dollar contracts, yachts, and supercars as if they were no more than toys. Amidst the glittering scene, a young waiter stood still. His crisp white shirt clung to his thin back, streaked with sweat from hours of serving. His calloused hands trembled as they gripped the silver tray. His eyes, ringed with exhaustion, still fought to maintain a smile. He was used to being treated as invisible. But never had disdain been laid so bare as in this moment. At the VIP table sat a billionaire, a towering name in the world of finance. Reclining in his chair with casual arrogance, his tailored suit draped perfectly over his broad frame. His eyes were cold, the eyes of a man accustomed to standing at the very peak of power. With a flick of his hand, he let a few bills and coins scatter across the table, his voice dripping with contempt as it rolled out slowly. "That's all you're worth." The bustling room fell into suffocating silence. A few curious glances darted their way, but quickly slipped aside as if no one dared be caught watching. The music still played, but it was warped off-key hollow. The young waiter bent down, his hands shaking as he gathered each bill, each coin rolling across the cold floor. And then his eyes lifted, gleaming yet burning with pain. It wasn't gratitude in his gaze, it was wounded pride. It was dignity shredded mercilessly before the world. The camera lingered on his hands, clutching the crumpled money tight. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. The air around him thickened, frozen in heavy silence. And in that crushing stillness, he made a decision. A decision that would change everything. The air inside the restaurant thickened, heavy as stone. The clink of silverware against plates, the chime of crystal glasses, the hum of conversation. All of it froze for a fleeting second, swallowed by a strange silence. At a nearby table, someone furrowed their brow, almost speaking up, but stopped. The others chose the safer route, turning away, pretending to focus on their own meals. In this gilded world, no one wanted to play hero for a nameless waiter. The young waiter drew in a long breath. His chest rose and fell. The scent of fine wine mingled with expensive perfume, churning his stomach. All his life he had learned to endure. But tonight his endurance had reached its breaking point. The coin in his hand felt heavy as lead, burning hot, searing his fingertips. The billionaire's gaze still pinned him, a look that didn't need words to say, "You are nothing but a servant, nothing more." The waiter let out a bitter, crooked smile. His eyes glistened red, yet his voice when it came was calm, steady, almost chilling. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't accept this." The words weren't loud, but in the suffocating silence they rang out like thunder. His trembling hand placed the coins back onto the gleaming glass table one by one. Each metallic clink echoed sharp and unrelenting like a slap across the billionaire's face. The man arched a brow, lips curling into a cold smile. He sat up straighter, his eyes cutting like blades as they swept over the scrawny figure standing before him. That fragile shadow daring to defy him under the gaze of so many watching eyes. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. "He's lost his mind. A waiter refusing a billionaire's tip. By tomorrow he'll be out of a job for sure." The venomous words stung like needles, but the waiter didn't blink. He stood firm, his hand resting on the scattered money, his eyes shining with something rare, something that no amount of wealth could ever buy. The billionaire chuckled, his laugh echoing with mockery. He picked up a coin, toyed with it, then let it fall again onto the glass. "You think dignity will put food on your table?" Once more the coin rolled and spun its metallic ring, digging into every heart in the room. But this time, it no longer made the waiter bow his head. His fist clenched tight. In that moment, the world around him, the chandeliers, the music, the sneers seemed to blur and dissolve. There were only two men left, one perched at the summit of power, one crushed at the bottom of society. And that line between them was about to shatter. The silence stretched on endless. Only the faint music drifting from the ceiling speakers remained, a melody once soothing, now warped and hollow, as though it too sensed the fragile balance between the two men standing face to face. The young waiter did not move. His back was straight. His eyes glistened heavy with tears unshed. His fingers trembled slightly against the glass table's edge, yet his voice no longer quivered. In those eyes, the faint spark from before had grown into a flame of pride, a flame this gilded room had never seen. At a nearby table, a wealthy businessman smirked, "Foolish. Refusing a billionaire's money, that's suicide." A refined woman shook her head, whispering, "Dignity doesn't pay the bills. He'll regret this." Each comment cut like a knife, slicing through the heavy air, pressing into the boy's heart. Yet strangely, he did not falter. Every word of scorn only seemed to root him more firmly to the ground. The billionaire, so accustomed to quiet submission, suddenly felt unease. Before him no longer stood a trembling servant, but a man. A man daring to meet his gaze, daring to reject his arrogant display of power. His brow furrowed. His cold smile faded. A spark of anger flickered in his eyes. The air around the table thickened heavy enough that even those seated far away struggled to breathe. The waiter drew in a deep breath. Then with slow, deliberate resolve, he pushed the money aside. Bills rustled. Coins spun and clattered, rolling to the edge of the table before settling with a metallic ring. That small sound reverberated like an explosion in the hearts of everyone watching. Their eyes locked. One side embodied wealth, command, arrogance. The other stood for pride, dignity, and a fragile but unshakable belief that some things were worth more than money. No one breathed. No one dared move. Only eyes followed, waiting for the next moment to break the silence. And then something strange crept into the room. A tension unlike anything before. As if this single act, small, almost trivial, might shatter the entire world of the powerful man before them. The camera pulled back, the frame widened. In the heart of the Golden Hall, a frail young waiter stood tall, defying a billionaire. The contrast was suffocating. And then, the billionaire laughed. But this time his laughter no longer rang with certainty. It was not the iron laugh of untouchable power. Deep within his eyes, for the first time, something flickered. A crack. The billionaire's laughter echoed through the room, but no one felt at ease. It was dry, hollow, stretched too long, like a mask trying to hide something underneath. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some swallowed hard. Others lowered their heads, pretending to study their wine, anything to avoid confronting the tension rising around them. The waiter still didn't move. His gaze was calm, yet so unwavering it made even the man of power flinch inside. And in that moment, the billionaire realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, his money meant nothing to someone. His eyes narrowed. His voice dropped low, hissing through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this." The threat fell heavy, like a hammer striking down. The air froze. Hearts of those watching raced faster, waiting, expecting the young waiter to bow, apologize, disappear forever from this glittering world. But instead, the boy leaned ever so slightly forward. His voice rang clear, steady, sharp as a blade slicing through the silence. "Maybe. But at least I'll never regret selling my dignity." A deadly stillness engulfed the room. The music stopped. Every eye locked on the two men standing across the golden table. And then darkness. The screen went black. The only sound left was the thunder of a heartbeat. A narrator's whisper cut through the silence. No one could have known that one small decision from a nameless waiter would keep a billionaire awake for many nights. Black screen. And all that remained was burning curiosity. The city morning began with the blare of car horns, the cries of street vendors weaving through the alleys, and the hurried footsteps of workers rushing to start their day. In stark contrast to the luxury of the city center along the river, in an old neighborhood, the first rays of dawn pushed through a faded curtain, spilling into a cramped little room. The rickety wooden bed creaked as a young man rose. His eyes still carried the weight of a restless night, but the clock already read 7. He splashed his face quickly with water from a dented aluminum basin, tugged on a white shirt with frayed collar, and rushed out the door. This was Alex the waiter, at the most prestigious restaurant in the city. To many, it was just a temporary job. To him, it was everything. It paid for his tiny rented room, for the medicine his ailing mother needed, and for the unfinished tuition that still hung over him like a shadow. The streets were crowded. Alex slipped through the current of bodies, clutching a worn canvas bag. Inside were only a few belongings: a faded handkerchief, a pair of white gloves washed thin, and a small notebook where he carefully tracked every cent saved. The camera followed his hurried steps. The sound of his worn shoes striking the pavement echoed against the hum of the city. His breath quickened. His heartbeat seemed to merge with the rhythm of the bustling streets. And then the restaurant came into view. A grand building of glass and marble, its gleaming windows already reflecting morning light. Even at this hour, crystal chandeliers glittered inside, scattering brilliance across the polished floor. Luxury cars lined the curb, chauffeurs in suits standing ready, opening doors for their elegant employers. Alex stopped before the massive entrance. He drew in a deep breath, straightened his collar, smoothed his messy hair, and pushed the door open. Inside it was another world. The scent of fresh flowers lingered. Gentle piano music floated from the corner. Staff in immaculate uniforms moved with practiced grace like dancers on a stage. Alex bowed to his colleagues, slipped on his white gloves, and picked up a silver tray from the counter. His steps fell into rhythm with the machinery of the restaurant, a world where every detail had to be flawless. But behind the ever-present smile on his face, his eyes revealed the truth, etched with fatigue. He worked from dawn until late into the night, trading his strength for a handful of tips. To the wealthy, it was pocket change. To him, it meant electricity for another month, a little more medicine for his mother, a fragile hope of someday returning to school. The camera lingered on his eyes, bright with hope, yet shadowed with worry. Inside him, a flame still flickered, small, weak, but never extinguished. Last night, that flame had been trampled, but the story was far from over. Alex's rented room was no more than 10 square meters. The walls were scarred with cracks, the ceiling stained with mold, and a single dangling bulb cast a weak yellow glow. Against the wall stood an old wooden bed beside it, a small desk salvaged from the discarded furniture of a wealthier family. On the desk, a neat stack of worn books. Next to them, a small notebook with a faded paper cover. Inside, Alex tracked every expense in painstaking detail: rent, medicine for his mother, daily meals. Tiny numbers carefully added and subtracted like an endless equation with no solution. In the corner, a frail woman lay in bed. Her hair had gone gray too early, her eyes hollowed by illness. She was Alex's mother. A soft cough shook her body, her trembling hand clutching the blanket. Each time she coughed, Alex flinched, rushing to steady her shoulder and offer the glass of water he always kept ready. "Are you okay, Mom?" His voice was low, tight with worry. She smiled faintly, her face lined with years that came too soon. "I'm fine, son. Just a little tired." Alex said nothing. His eyes burned red, but he kept it hidden. He knew her condition was far worse than a little tired. But medicine was too expensive. The hospital demanded costs he couldn't cover. And so he did the only thing he could: work harder, save more. The camera lingered on Alex's calloused hands as he pulled a bundle of crumpled bills from a drawer. The notes were thin, worn, ready to tear at the edges, but to him they were a fortune. He counted each one, recorded it carefully in the notebook, then tucked it away inside a small wooden box. He sat back down, watching his mother drift into a restless sleep. The room was silent, broken only by her fragile breathing. Under the dim yellow light, Alex's face came into focus, young, yet weathered by life. His eyes held both determination and despair. Memories surged through his mind. As a child, he had dreamed of becoming a chef. He would stand outside the windows of grand restaurants, his eyes sparkling as he watched dishes plated like works of art. He once believed that with enough effort, he too would stand in such a kitchen one day. But that dream had been smothered by hospital bills, crushed under the weight of debt. Now all he had left was waiting tables. Every day he put on a forced smile, bowed his head under the shouts of customers, endured the contempt of the wealthy. But deep inside, that dream was not dead. It was buried, hidden beneath the dust of harsh reality. The camera slowly drifted away from the dim room, slipping through the old window frame. Outside, the morning sun blazed bright. The streets pulsed with hurried footsteps. And the city carried on, unaware of the young man in that small, forgotten room. A poor waiter whose dignity was worth more than all the coins a billionaire could throw. And that dignity was about to shake the very foundations of the wealthy man's world. The late afternoon sun streamed through the restaurant's tall glass windows, scattering golden light across crystal goblets and polished cutlery, making the entire room glow like a living painting. From the outside, one saw only opulence, tailored suits, glittering evening gowns, booming laughter, blending seamlessly with smooth jazz. But behind the staff door, the world was entirely different. In the cramped break room, Alex stood among a few co-workers. Their chatter filled the air. "Heard the famous Billionaire's coming again tonight. Guess it's going to be another long one." "Yeah, long, but worth it. The tips will be heavy. Just bow your head, smile, and you'll be fine." Alex stayed quiet, carefully smoothing the white shirt he'd ironed crisp that morning. He always kept his uniform as clean as possible, a small act of dignity in a world that overlooked him. One colleague sneered, eyes narrowing with mockery. "Alex, let's hope you don't mess things up again tonight. You know the rule, customers are always right." "Got it." He gave a faint nod. No protest, no defense. But a flicker of sadness flashed across his eyes. The shift began. Alex stepped out with a silver tray in hand, bowing politely to each table. The camera swept across the room. A rotund businessman laughing too loudly about a contract just signed, a jeweled socialite flashing rings and diamonds with every gesture. A young couple snapping endless photos of their meals for social media. In this world, Alex was little more than a shadow. He poured wine, changed plates, wiped tables, always with a polite smile. No one remembered his name. No one cared about his dreams or his life. To them, he was simply the waiter. Now and then, Alex glanced through the glass windows where the sunset painted the sky crimson. A pang of longing pierced him. If life hadn't pressed him so hard, maybe he'd be in a culinary classroom at this very hour. Knife in hand, eyes bright with passion, creating dishes bursting with color. Instead, his hands carried trays, picking up coins tossed carelessly on the floor. The steady clink of cutlery echoed a monotonous rhythm that weighed on his chest. The scent of steak and aged wine hung in the air, but for Alex, it was only a reminder that he would never afford to taste them. At one point, he caught sight of himself in the grand mirror on the wall. A young man in a white shirt, face composed but eyes hollow with exhaustion. He realized then he was nothing more than a faded shadow drifting through this glittering feast. The manager's sharp call jolted him back. "Alex, hurry up, the VIP table is here. Don't keep them waiting." His heart pounded. A strange unease tightened in his chest. The VIP table. The very place where last night's humiliation had unfolded. The very place where he would once again face the wealthy man who had tossed money in his face. The camera froze on Alex's slow steps, the silver tray quivering in his hands. The jazz music still played, but now it sounded like a countdown. A door was about to open, and a world was about to turn upside down. Night fell over the city like a velvet curtain shimmering with neon. Towers blazed with light. Billboards flickered, car horns merged with the restless pulse of the streets. Yet inside the restaurant, a different world existed, a golden glowing sanctuary of luxury, as if sealed away from the chaos outside. The revolving glass door spun open. A group entered, drawing immediate attention. At the front walked a tall, broad-shouldered man with neatly combed gray hair wrapped in a sleek black suit. Every step he took seemed to shift the air around him. Diners murmured, some even turned discreetly to stare. There was no mistaking that face, Richard Hale, finance billionaire, infamous for both his wealth and his ruthlessness. Trailing him were young assistants clutching phones and folders, always ready to take notes. Behind them, 2 bodyguards in dark suits, earpieces gleaming, scanned the room with sharp eyes, ensuring the billionaire's space would remain untouchable. The restaurant manager hurried forward, bowing low-voiced, syrupy sweet. "It's an honor to welcome you, Mr. Hale. This way, please." Every gaze in the room followed. Whispers rose. That's really him. The man who once bought out an entire skyscraper in a single day. I've heard he's ruthless. Bankrupted entire companies with just one signature. Richard paid them no mind. He gave a curt nod, his cold eyes sweeping the room, the gaze of a man long accustomed to standing at the peak. For a fleeting second, his eyes caught on Alex. The waiter frozen at the far end of the hall, silver tray trembling faintly in his hands. Alex's heartbeat thundered, his whole body tensed. The memory of last night came crashing back, the coin clattering on glass, the cruel words, "That's all you're worth," like a blade etched deep into his mind. But this time Alex didn't lower his eyes. He held his ground. His gaze locked with Richard's, a clash of arrogance and quiet fire. Richard smirked, releasing a dry chuckle, then turned away and took his seat at the VIP table prepared for him. Leather chairs gleamed, crisp white linens stretched perfectly smooth, crystal glasses shimmered in the chandelier's glow. Plates of delicate appetizers were laid out flawless. Alex approached, tray in hand. The sound of his shoes against the marble echoed each step weighted. He bowed slightly, poured the wine with practiced precision, the smile of professionalism on his lips. But his hand trembled ever so slightly. Perfume lingered in the air. Golden light spilled over Richard's sharp features, carving them into cold marble. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Some diners glanced toward the VIP table, curiosity tinged with tension. Fellow staff stole quick looks at Alex, some worried, some sneering. One slip, and he's finished. The camera moved in. Alex lifted the bottle, tilting it gracefully. The deep red liquid flowed swirling into Richard's glass under the light. A close shot of Alex's eyes revealed calmness, but also a depth that hinted he was ready for anything. Richard raised his glass, swirling the crimson liquid, taking a measured sip. He set it down, leaning back, his gaze once more on Alex. A faint smile touched his lips, but no one in the room could tell what lay behind it. Outside, rain began to fall. Drops drummed against the glass, steady and foreboding. The storm was near. Rain beat harder against the glass windows, droplets streaming down like glowing trails under the streetlights. Inside the restaurant still shimmered in golden light, yet the atmosphere had shifted. The chill of the storm outside mingled with an invisible tension settling heavily over every table. Richard leaned back in his chair, slowly cutting into a perfectly cooked steak. Each movement deliberate, unhurried, as though the entire world existed only to serve him. Guests at nearby tables stole cautious glances, their eyes caught between awe and fear. No one dared speak too loudly. No one dared laugh too freely. Alex stood quietly at his side, attentive to every detail of the table. He swept away crumbs, replaced plates, refilled glasses. His hands were precise, practiced, but his eyes betrayed a quiet vigilance. He could feel that Richard was watching him. Not watching to be served, but for another reason. A reason that made every step, every gesture feel like it was under a magnifying glass. Moments later, one of Richard's companions let out a loud laugh, raising his glass. "Mr. Hale, your story from last night was incredible. A waiter daring to stand up to you. Absolutely ridiculous." The laughter rang sharp and grating. A few women at the next table giggled in response. Whispers followed eyes turned toward Alex, this time openly mocking. Alex froze for a breath, the tray in his hand suddenly heavier. Heat rushed to his ears, his throat tightened. But he bowed his head, pressed his lips together, and carried on as though nothing had been said. The camera cut close, his hand gripping the tray so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then to Richard's face. He did not laugh. He didn't join the ridicule. He simply sipped his wine, his gaze flashing with something unreadable. For a few brief seconds, the atmosphere shifted again. The laughter faltered, grew softer. The rain outside pounded harder, as though hammering down the unspoken tension flooding the room. A coworker passed by, leaning in to whisper, "Ignore it. Don't be stupid. You know how it works here." One frown from him, and your life's over. Alex gave no reply. Just a small nod. But in his eyes, something flickered, a mix of pain and resolve. The ache in his chest swelled. He knew if he kept bowing his head forever, all that would remain of him was shame. Richard set his glass down. The crisp ring of crystal against wood sliced the silence. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but sharp, each word landing like a blade. "So you're still here? Good. I'll be waiting to see what you do tonight." The room froze. Every curious eye turned instantly to them. The rain outside thudded heavier like a drumbeat, pressing forward the inevitability of what was to come. The camera pulled back, capturing the scene in the heart of the lavish restaurant. Under chandeliers and hushed whispers, a poor young waiter stood under the gaze of a billionaire's power. The tension was suffocating, like the stillness before a storm. And then, the frame held on Alex's eyes. Bright, burning, alive with a fire no one had seen before. No one knew that this night would change both of their lives forever. Outside, the rain kept drumming against the glass, an eerie refrain that refused to fade. Inside, the golden glow of chandeliers blanketed the room, but it couldn't erase the suffocating tension crawling across every table. Alex stood straight, silver tray in hand, a polite smile frozen on his lips, but sweat soaked his palms. He knew tonight would be unlike any night before. The restaurant manager strode over, face stern, voice low, but laced with threat. "Alex, you're serving the VIP table. No mistakes. No displeasing the guest." "Understand." Alex nodded. "Yes, I understand." The manager narrowed his eyes, leaning in close, whispering with a hiss. "Especially Mr. Hale. If you dare cross him, don't expect me to protect you." The words sliced into him like a blade. Alex tightened his grip on the tray, lowered his head, and moved forward. The camera swept slowly to the VIP table. Richard Hale sat there, his cold eyes scanning the room. He lifted his glass, swirling the crimson liquid before letting his gaze lock on Alex, approaching now, step by step. A faint, unreadable smile tugged at Richard's lips. Alex poured wine, cleared plates, set new dishes. Every motion flawless, precise. Yet the air remained heavy, oppressive. Richard's companions laughed loudly, talking over one another, boasting of deals worth hundreds of millions, yachts, villas, numbers so vast Alex couldn't even imagine them. Then one of them, a stout man with a glittering gold ring, tapped his fork against his glass. "Hey waiter, my wine's gone flat. Bring me another bottle. Quick." The demand was sharp, delivered without even a glance at him. Alex nodded, hurried to fetch the wine. But when he returned, the man's face twisted in disdain. "What took you so long? Trying to let us die of thirst." Laughter erupted, harsh cutting echoing through the room like knives. Alex stiffened, hand tightening around the neck of the bottle. His lips pressed tight, eyes lowered, silent. The camera cut to Richard. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't joining in. He just watched, his gaze dark, calculating, waiting. Alex leaned in, pouring the fresh wine. The deep red streamed smoothly into crystal, shimmering under the chandelier's light. His hand was steady, but his heartbeat thundered like war drums. The stout man lifted his glass, took a sip, then casually flicked the last drops onto the floor right in front of Alex. "Next time faster. Understand?" The droplets splattered against the cold tile. Red spread like blood. The room shuddered with another round of mocking laughter. Alex bowed his head, murmured softly, "I'm sorry, sir." But in his eyes, something else flared. The camera zoomed in, capturing that glint. A spark, a fire. Something pushed right to the edge. The harsh laughter from the VIP table still echoed as Alex turned away. The silver tray in his hands felt unbearably heavy, every step of his shoes against the marble floor, landing like a dry, hollow thud. He tried to steady his breath, but inside his chest, his heart pounded wildly, threatening to break free. Behind him, the manager stormed over, yanking him into a shadowed corner, voice cracking like a whip. "Alex, what are you doing out there? Making the guests wait, letting them complain. Do you want me fired along with you?" Alex shook his head frantically, voice cracking. I brought the wine as fast as I could. There's no fast as I could. There's only right or wrong. And tonight you were wrong. Do you understand?" The words slammed down, suffocating. A few other staff lingered nearby, pretending to polish glasses, but their eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. They whispered, "Getting chewed out again." Serves him right. Always acting so serious. The camera cut close to Alex's face. His eyes downcast, his jaw clenched, his lips stretched into a paper-thin smile. Fragile. Forced. A mask to shield himself from the humiliation. Back in the dining hall, the VIP feast carried on. Laughter glasses, clinking knives, slicing through tender meat. All a symphony of wealth and indulgence. But to Alex, it was torture. Every sound was another reminder of the cage he lived in. Carrying his tray, he approached another table. A woman in a fiery red dress frowned, lifting her glass. "You there. This glass has a stain. What kind of service is this?" Alex bowed deeply. Voice hushed. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll replace it immediately." But as soon as he turned, whispers rose again. "So incompetent. Can't believe they still keep him here." Each word, each snicker, like needles piercing his skin. Alex quickened his pace, avoiding their eyes, but the feeling of being swallowed whole only grew stronger. The camera shifted back to the VIP table. Richard Hale sat with his usual composure, eyes glinting coldly. He observed everything: the bowed apologies, the colleagues' smirks, the guests' scorn. Nothing escaped him. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He simply sipped his wine, letting the young waiter writhe inside the invisible net of humiliation. The manager swooped in again, yanking the tray from Alex's hands, spitting words like venom. "You're embarrassing this restaurant. If you can't keep your mouth shut and just work, then get out." Alex froze. His throat locked. For a split second, he wanted to scream, to throw it all away, but he forced it down. His fists clenched, knuckles blanching white. The camera closed in tight. Alex lifted his eyes and met Richard's. Once again, their gazes collided. But this time, something in Richard's look had shifted. It wasn't just arrogance, it was curiosity, as if he were waiting to see whether Alex would finally break or ignite. Outside, thunder cracked. Rain hammered the glass harder, relentless. Inside, the dining hall thickened with silence, heavy as dynamite. A bomb was waiting, and the spark was already burning. Outside, the rain pounded harder, drumming against the glass. Lightning split the night sky, streaks of white light flashing through the massive windows, casting brief, jagged shadows across the suffocating luxury of the dining hall. Alex approached the VIP table, balancing a tray of fresh dishes. The smell of butter sauce drifted through the air, heavy and rich, mixing with the sharp bite of expensive liquor. He set plates before each guest, bowing low. Every movement was precise, but the tension thickening the room made his hands tremble ever so slightly. The stout man with the glittering gold ring, the same one who had mocked him earlier, took a bite of steak. He chewed slowly, then suddenly slammed his knife down, voice shrill and cutting. "Too salty. This is how your restaurant serves VIP guests." The words cracked through the air. For a heartbeat, the table fell silent. Then laughter rippled, cruel and amused. Another man clapped him on the back, jeering, "Maybe it's the waiter's fault. Probably brought the wrong plate." Every eye turned to Alex. From across the room, the manager came rushing, sweat breaking across his forehead. He bent nearly double, bowing frantically. "My deepest apologies, sir. There must have been a mistake in service. I'll handle this at once." Then he whipped around, fire blazing in his glare. "Alex, what have you done? Apologize to the gentleman. Now." Alex froze. He knew the truth. The dish wasn't his mistake. The chef had seasoned it. He had only carried it out. But as always, every fault landed squarely on his shoulders. He swallowed hard, voice unsteady. "Sir, I only served what was prepared." The stout man shot to his feet, jabbing a finger in Alex's face. "Are you calling me a liar?" The dining room jolted alive. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Curious eyes snapping toward the unfolding spectacle. Half intrigue, half hunger for a scene. Alex staggered back a step, heart hammering. Sweat streaked down his temple. In that moment, he felt impossibly small, a pawn shoved back and forth in someone else's game. The manager hissed through clenched teeth, loud enough for the crowd to hear Alex bow your head and apologize. Now. Immediately, the camera cut in tight on Alex's face. His vision blurred under the blinding chandeliers. His chest heaved. Inside him, a war raged to bow and keep his job, or to finally defend the last shred of dignity he still had. And then Richard Hale's voice cut through the air. Low, calm, commanding. Enough. The room froze. Every head turned toward him. Reclining in his chair, Richard's fingers interlaced his eyes, never leaving Alex. "I want to hear him." His tone was quiet, but its weight left no room for resistance. The camera swung back to Alex. His head lifted slowly. His lips trembled. His chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. The world hushed. Even the storm outside seemed to fade. What would he say? Would he bow and accept blame for something he hadn't done, or stand his ground no matter the cost? The lens locked on Alex's burning eyes, then cut to black. Outside, thunder tore across the sky once more. The restaurant was silent. Even the usual clink of silverware had stopped. Every eye in the room was fixed on Alex. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as sand. His hands clenched tight around the silver tray veins standing out, trembling under the strain. His heart pounded so violently it seemed ready to tear free from his chest. Richard leaned back in his chair, cold eyes unblinking, his voice slow and sharp, each word like a blade. "Speak. Are you at fault? Or not?" The words sliced through the air. Alex drew in a long breath. His shoulders quivered, but his gaze steadied. Slowly, he lifted his head and met Richard's stare. His voice broke the hush, quiet but clear enough to carry across the room. "No. I'm not at fault." A ripple of shock tore through the dining hall. Murmurs erupted. A guest's hand flew to her mouth, her wine glass trembling. The manager's face drained of color as he rushed to Alex's side, hissing like a whip. "Alex, be quiet. Do you want to be ruined?" But Alex didn't move. His eyes never left Richard. His voice grew stronger, steadier. "I only carried the dish. I didn't season it. That is not my mistake." The room froze in disbelief. Mocking laughter died mid-breath. The stout man with the gold ring flushed crimson, slamming his fist onto the table. "You little brat, how dare you contradict a guest?" A wine glass toppled, deep red liquid spilling across the pristine white cloth, spreading like blood. The sound of it dripping was chilling. Alex flinched back half a step, but his gaze held firm. His lips trembled, yet his words pressed forward, pounding out like a drumbeat. I am only speaking the truth." The camera swept across the crowd, shock, fascination, disdain. A few smirked, whispering under their breath. "He's lost it. Just signed his own death sentence." The manager's hands shook as he turned to Richard, voice trembling with desperate deference. "Mr. Hale, please don't trouble yourself. He's just a naive boy with no manners. I'll take care of this immediately." But Richard raised a hand, cutting him off. His eyes never left Alex. His lips curved faintly as though savoring a rare discovery. "Do you even know who you're speaking to?" Richard's voice dropped low, heavy with menace. Alex drew a breath, his hand trembling as he set the silver tray down on a nearby table. He straightened his back, his eyes blazing beneath the chandelier's golden light. "I know, but I also know. Dignity has no price to bargain with." The words cracked through the suffocating air like thunder. The hall fell deathly silent. Somewhere a fork clattered onto a plate with a sharp metallic clang that made the entire room flinch. Richard froze. For the briefest flicker, something unreadable flashed in his eyes. Then he laughed, low, resonant, but coiled with danger. Well, a waiter, daring to lecture me." The laughter rolled across the hall, echoing, stretching, cold enough to chill every spine. The camera closed in on Alex's face, eyes rimmed with red but burning, unyielding. Not bowing, not breaking. Outside, thunder cracked like cannon fire. The storm had truly begun. Richard's laughter echoed for a long moment before fading. He set his wine glass down, tapped a finger lightly against the rim of crystal, his gaze never leaving Alex. "Very well. If you want to keep your dignity." His voice was calm, but each word cut like a blade. "Then I'll give you the chance to prove it." The manager stumbled forward, bowing frantically, his voice trembling. "Mr. Hale, please don't trouble yourself. I'll have him removed immediately. He's just a lowly worker, not worth your—" Richard raised a hand, slicing through the plea. His eyes froze cold. "No. I want him to decide his own fate. Right now." The room went silent. The only sound was the relentless pounding of rain against the glass. Richard folded his arms, leaned back in his chair, and spoke clearly, his words carrying to every corner. "Manager, here is my order. Either you fire him on the spot, or this restaurant is erased from every list of places I'll ever set foot in." The declaration hit like thunder. The manager's face drained, sweat pouring down his temples. He spun toward Alex, eyes burning with both rage and terror. You heard him. Get on your knees. Apologize to Mr. Hale. Right now. If you don't, you're finished." Whispers swept across the room. "It's over. The boy's done for. No one defies Mr. Hale. He's just a waiter." What was he thinking? Alex stood frozen. His shoulders trembled. His breath came fast and shallow. In his mind, images surged, his damp, crumbling room, his mother's frail face, the notebook filled with debts. And then, the memory of the night before. The cold coin clattering on the table. The cruel words. "That's all you're worth." The camera zoomed in on his hand, clenched so tight his knuckles were bone-white veins straining. He drew in a long breath, lifted his head. His eyes blazed wet but unwavering. "I will not kneel." His voice was hoarse, but it rang clear. A shockwave rippled through the room. Gasps. Glasses rattled in nervous hands. Some guests set their drinks down quickly, afraid of what might erupt. The manager shrieked, voice cracking like glass. "Alex, are you insane? Apologize this instant. This is your last chance." But Alex didn't move. His face was strangely calm. He looked straight at Richard, each word deliberate, steady. I may lose my job. I may lose everything, but I will not lose my dignity. The hall froze heavy with stunned silence. Richard narrowed his eyes, saying nothing at first. Then suddenly he laughed again, not booming this time, but low, dark, and chilling. Interesting. A waiter dares to defy me. He rose to his feet. The chair scraped back its legs, slamming the floor with a sharp crack. His gaze drilled into Alex, heavy, crushing, like it could grind him to dust. Very well, then prepare to pay the price. The camera cut to Alex, sweat-beading eyes rimmed with red but unbroken, unbowed. Outside, thunder rumbled violently, rolling long and deep, heralding a storm far greater than the one battering the windows. The air inside the restaurant thickened, heavy and suffocating. Richard stood tall, commanding his cold eyes drilling into Alex. Every gaze in the room was fixed on them, waiting for the play to unfold. He lifted his wineglass, swirled it lazily, then cast his gaze across the table of guests. His voice was low, steady, yet weighted with power. What do you think? A waiter dares to defy me. Is he worth forgiving? Whispers flared immediately. A woman in a striking red dress tilted her head, her voice sharp and shrill. Outrageous. He can't even muster an apology. Doesn't know his place. A young businessman nearby smirked, adding his cut. If he worked for my company, he'd be gone already. No one needs an employee with an ego. Each comment sliced into Alex like invisible blades. The camera zoomed on his face, lips pressed tight, eyes rimmed red. Yet his gaze did not falter, a silence heavy with pride. The manager quickly seized the moment, voice, eager, desperate to appease Mr. Hale. Please rest assured, I'll fire him immediately to preserve your honor and the restaurant's. But Richard raised a hand, a thin, cold smile crossing his lips. No. I want a little fun. Let's see what his dignity is worth. He turned, gesturing to another waiter. It was Mark, Alex's co-worker, the one always snide, always envious. Richard fixed his gaze on him. If it were you, what would you do to someone who disobeyed? Mark hesitated briefly, then glanced at Alex. A flicker of smug contempt lit his eyes. He smirked. I'd make him kneel, so he'd remember our job is to serve. Laughter rippled through the room. A few staff nodded in false agreement, their eyes betraying both fear and petty satisfaction. Alex's fists clenched at his sides. His heart ached not from humiliation, but from the bitter truth. Even those who shared his struggle would gladly betray him to please the powerful. Richard sipped his wine, eyes never leaving Alex. Slowly, he set the glass down, his voice carrying like a sentence past. You see, you have no one. The whole world stands against you. Just kneel, and it all ends. Silence fell. The rain outside hammered harder like drums of war, urging him down. The camera panned slowly across faces, sneers, curiosity, smug anticipation. All of them certain Alex had no way out. He stood there, shoulders trembling, eyes blurred under the blazing chandelier. His hand shook, then loosened. A heavy breath escaped his chest. For a fleeting moment, he seemed ready to collapse. The manager sighed in relief. Some guests chuckled, convinced the play was ending. But then Alex lifted his head. His eyes burned like fire. His voice rang out slow, steady, every word striking like a hammer. If I must kneel to keep this job, then I'd rather walk away. A deathly silence fell over the room. Richard narrowed his eyes, the corner of his mouth curling into a smile impossible to read. He tapped his finger against the table, slow, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down. The whispers hadn't even died down when Richard let out a low, deliberate laugh. It stretched slow and measured like a man savoring every second of the spectacle. Rising to his feet, he lifted his wineglass. His voice, deep and resonant, carried across the room, a penniless waiter daring to defy an entire table. Very well. If you believe dignity has such value, then prove it before everyone here. His gaze swept the room. Guests at other tables turned instantly, curiosity burning in their eyes. Phones lifted discreetly, cameras glinting, capturing every frame of the unfolding drama. Richard placed the glass back on the VIP table, nudging it toward Alex with one finger. The dark red liquid clung to the crystal like streaks of blood. His words dripped like poison. You claim dignity cannot be bought. Then take this glass and throw it in my face. If you dare, I'll acknowledge you kept your pride. The restaurant erupted in murmurs. God, he's daring him to destroy himself. If he does it, he'll vanish from this city tomorrow. If he doesn't, what has he proven? The manager's face drained of all color. He leaned in, whispering urgently into Alex's ear. Don't listen to him. Bow, apologize, and this ends. Do it, or you're finished. Mark, the bitter co-worker, snickered, leaning close with venom in his voice. Go on, Alex, prove you're so noble. Do it, and I'll walk you straight out the door. Alex stared at the glass. His hand trembled. His breath came heavy. Images flooded his mind. His mother's frail face, the damp little room he called home, the notebook filled with endless debts. and above them all, the cold clang of a coin tossed at his feet. The cruel laughter from the night before. The camera zoomed close. Sweat slid down his temple, glistening under the harsh golden lights. His heartbeat thundered like war drums. He reached out, slowly. His fingers closed around the stem of the glass. The entire restaurant froze. Not a blink, not a breath. Richard narrowed his eyes, a smirk tugging at his lips. In his gaze, arrogance disdained certainty. He was sure the boy would fold. He would tremble. He would break, just as the weak always did. But then Alex raised the glass. The crimson wine caught the light, painting his face with fire. His eyes burned steady and unyielding. 1 second, 2, the room held its breath. And then Alex tilted the glass. The wine spilled, slow and deliberate, cascading onto the polished floor. Each drop hit with a sharp tap. Tap. Tap in the deathly silence. He set the glass down, straightened his back, his gaze locked with Richard's. His voice, low and even, struck like thunder. I don't need to throw wine to keep my dignity. As long as I don't bow to you, that's enough. A shockwave rippled through the room. Nearby guests gaped, jaws slack. The manager staggered, speechless. Mark's eyes bulged with disbelief. Richard said nothing. He only stared. And for a fleeting moment, the corner of his mouth twitched, not quite rage, not quite amusement. Something darker. Something. Outside, lightning split the sky. The rain hammered harder like cannon fire against glass. The camera closed in on Alex's face, sweat exhaustion, but eyes blazing with defiance. No one in that room knew what would happen next. A silence stretched thick and suffocating, every eye locked on Alex. Richard stood tall, one hand resting casually on his glass, his gaze drilling into the young waiter as if stripping bare every thought in his head. Then he laughed, low, dry, a sound like steel grinding against steel. He clapped twice sharp, precise, and the air in the restaurant seemed to quake. Impressive. You think a few noble words are enough to guard your dignity? Let me show you its true price. He turned toward the manager, his voice icy. Fire him. Now, in front of everyone. The manager blanched, his voice trembling. Sir, but... Richard slammed his palm against the table. The sound cracked through the air. No buts. Do it, or tomorrow this restaurant will vanish from the world of the elite. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A hush fell, broken only by frantic whispers. A death sentence had just been pronounced. The manager, nearly collapsing, spun toward Alex, his eyes blazing with fear and fury. You hear that? You've ruined yourself. Get out now. The camera closed on Alex, his face pale, his hands trembling at his sides. Yet his eyes still burned. Slowly he spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. If leaving means I refuse to kneel, then I'll accept it. The manager froze. A few staff members flinched. No one had expected him to dare say it aloud. Richard's lips curved into a thin, cruel smile. He stepped forward, each footfall echoing against the marble like the toll of a judge's gavel. Thud, thud. He stopped half a step from Alex. Their eyes locked. One man cloaked in absolute power, the other fragile yet unyielding. Richard leaned in, his voice low but sharp enough for the entire room to hear. Who do you think you are? You're nothing. A ragged servant. A nameless boy with nothing. Defy me. And tomorrow you'll have no roof, no bread. Do you really believe dignity can pay for your mother's medicine? The camera snapped to Alex. He froze. His body stiffened. His eyes widened with shock. How did Richard know about his mother's frailty? About the damp, crumbling apartment? About the debt scribbled in a worn notebook? The room erupted in whispers. He knows everything. No one escapes. Richard Hale's reach. Alex's lips parted, but no words came. His chest heaved, strangled by fear. Richard straightened, his tone calm but resonant, like the toll of a funeral bell. I can turn this entire city against you. I can cut off your mother's medicine. I can make sure no one hires you again. One snap of my fingers and your so-called dignity will have nowhere left to stand. The words struck like a guillotine. The camera lingered on Alex's face, sweat-dripping eyes, bloodshot, breath ragged. He looked cornered, crushed, suffocating. Outside, lightning tore the sky open. White light flashed across the glass, framing the scene, the titan of power towering and the fragile boy trembling but still upright. The restaurant held its breath, not a sound, not a movement. And in that suffocating moment, everyone knew. Alex's next words would decide everything. The restaurant fell deathly silent. Every eye was fixed on Alex. His face had gone pale, lips trembling, eyes wide with horror. Only one question screamed in his head. How did Richard know? Richard stood firm, gaze cold as steel. He was a predator, having just exposed the fatal weakness of his prey. His voice cut through the air, slow and sharp as a blade. You have nothing. You're just a penniless servant. You may stand tall in here, but out there. With one order, I can strip you of everything. Rain hammered against the glass outside. Thunder cracked overhead. The atmosphere thickened, pressing down on every chest. No one dared breathe. Alex staggered, his legs buckling. For a moment, he wanted to collapse, to run, to disappear. The camera slid closer, his face lowered, swallowed in shadow. But in that darkness, a faint light flickered. A voice whispered in his mind, weak, fragile, yet warm. Son, hold on to your dignity. No matter how poor we are, that is something we still own. His mother's image flashed before him, frail, lying in bed, her thin hand clutching his. Her eyes, despite illness, still burning with faith. Alex's heart slammed against his ribs. His breath quickened. A fire surged through his chest. The camera cut to his trembling hands, slowly curling into fists. Alex lifted his head. His eyes, red with tears, now blazed with light. His voice broke out, shaking yet unyielding. You can take my job. You can take my bread. But you will never take my dignity. Never. The room seemed to quake. Some guests shot to their feet, stunned. The manager froze, speechless. Mark's jaw dropped, his eyes wide. Richard faltered. For one brief second, his smile stiffened. Then he erupted into laughter, loud, echoing, relentless, as if trying to drown out the tremor that had just shaken the room. Well said. Well said. A waiter dares to stand tall before me. He turned, gesturing with a flick of his hand. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, gripping Alex's shoulder and forcing him down. But let's see, Richard sneered, his smile razor sharp, if dignity can feed your sick mother. Alex clenched his jaw. His body trembled, but he refused to kneel. His fist tightened, shaking with defiance. The camera drifted toward the towering window. A shadow appeared outside. An old man, limping under the rain, stepped through the doorway. His raincoat dripped water. His cane tapped against the marble floor, and his eyes glimmered with an uncanny light beneath the thunder's flash. Gasps spread through the crowd. The bodyguards moved to intercept, but Richard raised a hand, signaling them to stop. His eyes narrowed, curious. The old man walked steadily forward, stopping behind Alex. His voice, rough yet resolute, rang out across the hall. The boy is right. There are things money can never buy. Every gaze swung to him. No one knew who he was, yet each word struck heavy as stone, shattering the suffocating silence. Alex turned, stunned. He didn't know it yet. But the arrival of this old man would change everything. The rain outside thundered down in torrents, but inside silence reigned so heavy you could hear each breath. Every eye locked on the old man who had just stepped in. His raincoat dripped puddles, forming at his feet. A frail hand leaned on a cane, yet each step carried a weight, a presence that commanded the room. His eyes, deep and sharp, glowed beneath the golden lights as they cut straight into Richard. Richard narrowed his gaze, voice low, wary. Who are you? This isn't a place for vagrants to meddle. The old man gave a faint smile, quiet but strong enough to rattle the air. He removed his soaked hood, revealing a crown of silver hair and a face lined with years of battles fought. A face instantly recognized by more than a few at the tables. Whispers erupted across the hall. God, is that really him? Impossible. I thought he vanished from the business world years ago. One guest, trembling, leaned to his companion. That's Jonathan Miles, former chairman of Miles Group. The only man who ever defeated Richard Hale. The words dropped like sparks into gunpowder. Gasps and murmurs rippled, eyes darting between Alex and Richard. Richard froze for a beat, his lip twitching, but he quickly recovered, masking his unease with a sneer. Jonathan, I thought you were gone. Old, sick, a relic not worth remembering. Jonathan stepped closer, his cane striking the marble floor in steady, unyielding beats that drowned even the pounding storm outside. He stopped beside Alex, resting a hand firmly on the boy's shoulder. Yes, I'm old. I'm weak. But there is one thing you will never have, Richard. His eyes blazed as his voice rose. Dignity. The room trembled with whispers again. The camera swept across astonished faces, some shocked, some thrilled, some even moved. Alex stood frozen, heart hammering. He could hardly comprehend why a man like Jonathan Miles, once a titan of industry, would stand here by his side. Richard's laugh came low and guttural, edged with fury dignity. That same luxury cost you everything. Your company, your throne, your power. You're nothing but a shadow of the past. Jonathan didn't flinch. His words rang out clear, sharp, undeniable. Maybe so, but at least I still sleep soundly at night. The room jolted. Even the storm outside seemed to roar louder. Some guests nodded faintly, murmuring to one another, a flicker of agreement on their lips. The camera closed in on Richard's face. His smile had died. His eyes, dark and seething, glared like storm clouds ready to burst. He spat the words each like a knife. So you came here to protect a worthless waiter. Fine. Let's see what two weak men can do against true power. Jonathan pressed his hand tighter on Alex's shoulder, his voice steady as steel. We'll show you that some things never bow to money. The camera tilted up to the chandelier above its crystal lights, refracting like shards of lightning. The tension thickened, primed to explode, and then fade to black. Only the sound of the storm remained, leaving the audience breathless. The rain hammered against the glass, thunder rolling like a relentless drumbeat, scoring the most charged moment of the night. The restaurant held its breath. Every eye was fixed on Jonathan Miles, an old man frail in body yet blazing with fire in his gaze, standing tall beside Alex. Jonathan leaned on his cane, his breath slow but steady. He locked eyes with Richard, his voice gravelly yet resonant. "This young waiter reminds me of myself. Over 30 years ago, I too stood before a man of power, and I was humiliated, just as he was." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Shocked murmurs erupted across the room. He was humiliated. Impossible. Jonathan Miles was a legend. Jonathan nodded slowly, his gaze never wavering from Richard. "Yes, but few know the truth that it was him." He raised his cane, pointing it directly at Richard. Gasps exploded, heads turned sharply, phones lifted into the air, flashes capturing what felt like history unfolding in real time. The camera cut to Richard. His face flickered just for a moment, then hardened. He chuckled a cold, dismissive sound. "You still remember that. A harmless joke. And in the end, tell me who won. I stand here." UP faded. Jonathan took a step forward, his cane striking the marble floor with authority. His voice grew firmer, echoing like a hammer. "Yes, you won with money, with power. But you never won against your own conscience. I may have lost my company, but I never lost my dignity." The words struck the air, reverberating through the gold-plated walls, striking directly at Richard's pride. Alex's heart pounded. He looked at Jonathan, then at Richard. For the first time, he felt as though fate was repeating itself, except tonight, he had the chance to change the ending. Richard stepped closer, fury flashing in his eyes. His voice dropped to a growl. "Old fool. You came back just to relive the same lesson, to protect a worthless waiter. To protect a to D." Jonathan's breath shuddered, but his hand, trembling yet firm, rested squarely on Alex's shoulder. "No. I came back to end this cycle. To make you understand once in your life that there are things you cannot buy." The room quaked. A ripple passed through the crowd, curiosity shifting into reflection. A guest whispered almost to himself, "He's right. Dignity can't be bought." The camera swept across faces, intrigued, contemplative, even admiring. The balance in the room was shifting. Richard clenched his fists, his face darkening, fury breaking through his mask of control. His words came out like shards of ice. "He's not worth my time. But if you stand with him, you'll share his fate. Poverty, obscurity, forgotten." Alex drew a long, steady breath. His fists tightened. He looked at Jonathan, then locked eyes with Richard. And when he spoke, his voice rang clear, sharp, unshakable. "If that's the price of keeping my dignity, then I'll pay it." The words detonated in the silence. Gasps rippled. Some guests stood unable to contain their shock. The camera closed on Richard. For the first time, his smile faltered. In his eyes flickered not only rage, but also something rare, something unsettled. The storm outside roared, pounding like war drums. Jonathan turned, his voice rising, not just for Richard, but for everyone in the room. "Tonight, all of you will see it with your own eyes. Money is not the greatest power. Dignity is. And it is dignity that will rob a billionaire of his sleep." The screen cut to black. Only the sound of rain remained. The restaurant erupted. What had started as whispers now swelled into a tidal wave. Guests twisted in their chairs, openly watching. Phones rose high, lenses flashing like sparks, capturing what had suddenly become history in the making. The camera panned across faces, mouths agape in shock. Others nodding, subtly, eyes betraying quiet agreement with Jonathan and Alex. The air itself had shifted, the iron grip of Richard's arrogance no longer absolute. Richard saw it. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. He stepped forward, voice low, words laced with venom. "You think a few noble words will change anything? They're just watching a show. Tomorrow, no one will even remember your name." But before his sneer could sink in, a voice rang out from the back of the room. A young man shot to his feet, phone held high. "I recorded everything, and I'm uploading it right now." Gasps surged like a wave. Richard snapped his head toward him, fury flashing. "You dare." Too late. More phones lifted into the air, screens glowing. Someone shouted, "Yes, let the whole city see what's happening here." The wave spread like wildfire. Cameras clicked, videos streamed. The hushed luxury of the dining hall dissolved into chaos, an audience transformed into a jury. The camera closed in on Alex. His breath came fast, his eyes wide, astonished at how quickly the tide had turned. But within that shock gleamed a spark, hope. The manager, pale as chalk, scrambled desperately. "Please stop. This is just a misunderstanding. No more recording. I beg you." But no one listened. Richard's fist clenched so hard the veins bulged across his forehead. He fought to hold his composure, but rage simmered beneath his skin. Jonathan, steady on his cane, raised his voice so all could hear. "You see, Richard, times have changed. Power no longer rests in one man's hand. It belongs to the people. And they... He swept his gaze across the crowd. They will be your judge. A clap rang out. Sharp, sudden. Then another. Then another. Applause spread from one table to the next until it thundered through the hall, drowning even the storm outside. The camera pulled back. Alex stood at the center of it all, gaunt, drenched in sweat, his white shirt clinging to his back. His face was weary, hollowed by struggle, yet his eyes burned brighter than the chandeliers above. Richard froze. The applause pounded in his ears louder than the rain, louder than his own pulse. He no longer saw the crowd nor the cameras. Only a single question rang in his skull, relentless. Dignity. Is this what finally makes me lose control? The camera zoomed tight on his eyes. Something flickered, rage, panic, maybe even fear. The narrator's voice fell into a hush, almost a whisper. No one ever imagined that a nameless waiter could shake a billionaire's throne. But now the question is, what will Richard Hale do next? The screen cut to black. The storm raged on. The applause thundered, rolling back from the crystal ceiling, crashing like waves on a storm-tossed sea. Alex stood in the center chest, heaving, eyes blazing. Beside him, Jonathan, old, frail but unyielding, rose like a wall against the storm. Richard didn't move. The chandelier's light carved his face into harsh shadows, sharp contrasts of brilliance and void. The arrogant smile was gone. In its place, a hard, frozen glare. Slowly, he raised his hand. The applause faltered, clapping hands falling silent one by one, until only the hollow echo of rain remained. Richard's voice cut through the air, sharp as steel. You call this justice? A cheap spectacle applauded only because of pretty words. No one answered, but the eyes staring back at him were no longer afraid. They were steady, defiant. Richard stepped forward, pointing directly at Alex. Who is he? A nameless waiter. No degree, no standing, no future. And this is who you cheer for. His words fell heavy hammer strikes meant to break the room, but instead of submission, murmurs of dissent rose like sparks. At least he dares to speak the truth. Refusing to bow, that takes courage. We've bowed too long to men like you. Richard's jaw clenched, veins bulging in his fists. And then a phone rang, shrill, piercing, cutting through the silence like a blade. The camera swung to a nearby table, a phone screen glowing, streaming live video. On it, Richard's own face filled the frame, his finger jabbing his voice, demanding Alex kneel. The words replayed crystal clear. A diner's trembling hand lifted the phone higher. It's live. More than 10,000 people are watching. Gasps erupted across the room. More phones lit up, screens flashing as numbers climbed. 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 views. Richard froze. His eyes widened. For the first time, the weight of power in his hands felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Jonathan's laugh broke the air, raspy, worn, but triumphant. Do you see now, Richard? You're not in control anymore. The world is watching. The camera cut close to Richard's face. Fury blazed in his stare, but beneath it, just for a flicker, was something else. Panic. He roared, voice thundering. Turn it off, shut it down now. Anyone still filming? I'll sue you into the ground. But his threats drowned in the roar of the crowd. Phones rose higher, shutters clicked faster, voices swelled louder, an unstoppable tide. For the first time, Richard Hale was no longer the one in control. Alex stood tall, breath-ragged shirt clinging with sweat, but his eyes were alight with fire. No longer afraid, only resolute. The board had flipped. The murmurs inside the restaurant swelled like a rising tide. Dozens of phones were raised, hundreds of eyes locked on Richard. He stood there, heavy, imposing, but now unsteady like a statue about to crack. Jonathan took a step forward, cane striking the marble floor. Thud. Thud. Each strike echoed with unshakable weight. His eyes blazed as he fixed them on Richard. It's time the truth was spoken. Years ago, he destroyed me. Not with talent, not with brilliance, but with filth, with treachery. Gasps rippled across the room. Guests at nearby tables leaned toward each other, whispering in disbelief. Could it be? It was all a lie. Richard Hale climbed his way up with deceit. Richard let out a forced, guttural laugh, harsh and brittle, the same tired accusations. A failure like you has no right to. But before he could finish, a voice rang out from the far end of the room. No, he's telling the truth. Every head turned. A middle-aged woman stepped out of the shadows, frail in frame, her face gaunt, her eyes bright, but burdened with sorrow. Her body trembled, but her voice carried across the room. I used to be Richard Hale's secretary. I saw everything. The night he forged documents to send Miles' group into ruin. The room erupted with a thunderclap of gasps. Phones lifted higher, capturing every word. Richard froze, his expression shifting, then lunged forward, snarling, "Shut your mouth, you're nothing but a worthless pawn." I cast aside. Tears streamed down the woman's face, but her gaze never wavered. She stared him down, her voice breaking yet fierce. "You can fire me, but you can't erase the truth. I still have all the evidence." The restaurant exploded into chaos. Cameras panned wildly, guests muttered, some even rising to their feet. Jonathan lifted his head, voice gravelly yet powerful. "Do you hear that, Richard? Even those who once served you now rise to expose you. Because the truth never sleeps." The camera zoomed in on Richard. His face flushed, purple eyes, bloodshot hands trembling. He looked around. Everywhere he turned were phones pointed at him, judgment burning in every gaze. His once absolute power slipped away like sand through his fingers. Beside him, Alex's heart pounded. His entire body felt ablaze. The insults, the humiliations, the injustices, all of it was being cleansed. He didn't have to fight anymore. The truth itself had stood up. Thunder cracked outside, blending with the pounding rain, an anthem for the fall of a tyrant. Richard stumbled back one step. Just one. But to everyone watching, it was the step of a king tumbling from his throne into the abyss. The room held its breath. And then from the shadows, a camera flash blazed. A journalist who had slipped in unnoticed raised his camera and fired shot after shot. His voice rang out sharp and clear. "Tomorrow the whole city will know the truth about Richard Hale." The camera closed in on Richard. His eyes widened, his chest tightened. And for the first time, true fear carved itself across his face. The sound of camera shutters, the roar of whispers, and the pounding of rain blended into one raging storm. Richard stood at the center, his face rigid, his eyes frantic. He spun, searching for a lifeline, but every gaze locked on him, no longer reverent, only condemning. He shouted, voice raw and cracking, "It's all lies. You think the words of an old man, a worthless secretary, can bring me down." But his voice was drowned beneath the rising tide of defiance. "We believe what we see. You no longer hold power here. You've unmasked yourself." Several guests shot to their feet, clapping, shouting, "Truth! Let the truth be heard." The sound thundered, rolling through the grand hall, shaking its very walls. The camera cut to Richard's two bodyguards. They glanced at each other, hesitation flickering in their eyes. Then, almost in unison, they lowered their hands, turned their backs, and walked away. The echo of their footsteps rang on the marble floor, leaving Richard utterly alone. The final blow had landed. Richard staggered, hands trembling violently. He reached out as if to grasp something solid, but found only empty air. Jonathan straightened, leaning on his cane. His voice, raspy yet resounding, cut through the chaos. "You thought you could buy everything. But do you see it now, Richard? When the truth rises, even those closest to you will abandon you." Applause erupted, deafening, no longer scattered, but unified, an overwhelming roar that drowned out the storm outside. Beside Jonathan, Alex stood tall, eyes rimmed red. He clenched his fists, lifting his head high. In the harsh glare of the chandeliers, he no longer looked like a lowly waiter. He stood like a banner, small, fragile, yet unyielding in the storm. Richard roared, his voice breaking apart. "No! I'm still Richard Hale. I am power, I am." But the words collapsed, shattering midair, lost beneath the cheers and the clapping. The camera zoomed in on his face. Rain trickled down from the great glass windows, dripping onto his cheeks, mingling with sweat and despair. In the eyes that once burned with arrogance, only emptiness remained. The lens swung back, Alex and Jonathan side by side, eyes burning with resolve. They didn't speak, but their silence carried more weight than 1,000 words. The camera pulled back further. A sweeping shot revealed the grand restaurant transformed into a public tribunal. The most powerful man cornered in the shadows. The smallest man standing tall in the light. Outside, thunder still split the skies, but inside every heart another storm raged, the storm of justice. Richard Hale has fallen to the truth. But the question remains, does Alex have the strength to walk the path that is now opened before him? The applause still thundered, echoing against every wall of the restaurant. Richard collapsed into his chair, face vacant, eyes hollow. His power, his arrogance, everything had crumbled in one stormy night. The camera panned slowly from him to Alex. The young waiter stood tall, his shirt soaked with sweat, his face gaunt, yet his eyes burned bright. He drew a long breath, heart still pounding, but now there was no fear. Jonathan leaned on his cane, tilting toward him, voice low. "Son, you've done what I could not. You kept your dignity." Alex looked at him, eyes glistening. He wanted to answer, but his throat closed tight. Instead, a trembling smile flickered across his lips, the smile of someone who had finally stepped out of the storm's shadow. Guests around the room rose one by one. Some walked over to shake Alex's hand. Others placed a firm hand on his shoulder, nodding with respect. "You reminded me what respect truly means. You've shown us that money can't buy everything. I'll tell this story to my son." Their words fell warm and steady like raindrops on parched earth. Alex felt weightless. All the humiliation, all the bitterness dissolved into a tide of empathy and admiration. The camera cut back to Richard. He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot. He stared at the scene before him, a poor waiter being honored while he himself was cast aside. His lips trembled, straining to scream, but no one listened. The noise of the room had swallowed him whole. Outside, the storm was easing. The last raindrops slid down the glass, shimmering beneath the streetlights. Fresh air drifted in, cool and cleansing, washing away the suffocating tension that had gripped the night. Alex lifted his gaze. Light from the chandeliers caught in his eyes, making them shine. He hadn't just kept his job, he had held on to the most precious thing of all, his pride. The camera swept past the glass windows toward the horizon. Dawn was breaking through, piercing the heavy storm clouds. A fragile beam of light, yet fierce, unyielding, split the darkness wide open. The next morning, every major newspaper carried the same story. Front pages blazed with the headline, "Billionaire Richard Hale forces waiter to kneel, but faces bitter consequences." Photos and videos from the stormy night flooded the media, spreading like wildfire. Millions of views, millions of comments. The city was shaken. Lavish parties, billion-dollar deals, none of it mattered anymore. What people remembered was a single image, a young waiter standing tall, eyes blazing, refusing to bow. The camera cut to Richard. Alone in a dark room, he sat before a television, looping the video over and over. The applause from last night echoed, hammering in his skull. His trembling hands clenched a glass of whiskey, then hurled it to the floor. It shattered, shards scattering, reflecting his broken, hollow face. He whispered to himself, voice ragged, "One coin, one nameless waiter, and I lost everything." The screen cut to Alex. He stepped out of the restaurant with nothing but an old apron and a bent silver tray. Yet his face carried a quiet smile. Outside, the morning sun broke through, gilding the rain-soaked streets with gold. Jonathan waited by the door, leaning on his cane, smiling faintly. "Son, you've won. Not because of power, but because you held on to what mattered most." Alex bowed his head, voice choked with emotion. "I only did what anyone should do." Jonathan looked off into the distance, his eyes brimming with conviction. "No. You did what most wouldn't dare. And that's why this story will be told for a very long time." The camera pulled back slowly, framing the two figures, one old, one young, standing side by side on the rain-washed street. A past finally laid to rest, a future just beginning. Soft piano notes drifted in, tender and lingering. The screen faded to black. Words appeared. Dignity cannot be bought, and sometimes a single act of courage is enough to change the world. Silence. That young waiter made a billionaire lose sleep for many nights. But what no one knew was this: from that night on, a new life had begun. The lights inside the restaurant